know that feeling? It's the middle of the night, you're wide awake, and there's this pull dragging you to the kitchen. You know you probably shouldn't, but it feels like you literally cannot fall back asleep without a snack. Well, what if I told you that might not be a bad habit at all? Welcome to Sleepedia, a corner of the internet dedicated to the science of sleep and circadian rhythms. Today, we're diving into a very real condition called night eating syndrome. So does that question ring a bell? That feeling? That core belief that you need to eat to be able to sleep? Well, that's the absolute heart of this whole thing. It's not just a craving. It feels like a biological switch you have to flip. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. For so long, people just wrote this off as a willpower problem, right? Something you could fix if you just had more self-control. But the science is telling a totally different story now. We're going to shift our whole perspective here. This isn't about being weak-willed. It's a biological condition where your body's internal clocks are just running on two completely different schedules. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's move past the feeling and look at the facts. What actually is this midnight struggle? Okay, so at its core, night eating syndrome, or NES for short, is all about a timing issue, a mismatch. Imagine your body has a clock for sleep and a separate clock for hunger. Well, with NES, it's like your sleep clock is set to New York time, but your hunger clock is still on LA time. Your brain is saying, hey, it's bedtime, but your stomach is yelling, wait, I haven't had dinner yet. So how do you know if it's really NES? The official signs are surprisingly specific. This isn't just about a random midnight snack here and there. We're talking about eating more than a quarter of your entire day's calories after your evening meal. It also means you're waking up to eat at least 2 times a week. And here's the kicker, you are 100% awake and you remember it all. This then leads to having basically zero appetite for breakfast, which, as we'll see, just kicks off a really tough cycle. And you might be thinking this sounds pretty rare, but check this out. NES affects about 1.5% of the general population. Now, that number might sound small, but if you do the math, that's millions and millions of people who are dealing with this every single night. But this is where the story gets even more interesting. Look at this jump. In the general population, it's 1.5%. But among people seeking treatment for obesity, that number skyrockets. It can be as high as 15%. That is a massive difference, and it really shows us that NES has a powerful link to our metabolic health. It is way more than just a quirky sleep habit. So the big question is, why? Why does this even happen? Let's geek out a little bit and look at the science of these confused clocks to figure out what's really going on behind that late-night craving. It really all comes down to your circadian rhythm. You've heard of it, right? It's basically your body's internal master clock. Think of it like the conductor of a huge orchestra, telling every part of your body when to play and when to rest. It controls sleep, energy, and, yep, hunger. With night eating syndrome, it's like the conductor's watch is running slow. So the hunger section starts its big solo long after everyone else has gone home for the night. Let's look at what's supposed to happen when you're going to bed. Normally, your body releases melatonin, the sleep hormone, to make you drowsy. And it releases leptin, the I'm full hormone, to keep cravings away. But with NS, the signals get scrambled. The production of both of these gets turned way down. So the go-to-sleep signal is weak, and the stop-eating signal is just a tiny whisper. And at the exact same time, the opposite is happening with 2 other hormones. Cortisol, the classic stress hormone, can be higher than it should be, making you feel wired and anxious. And ghrelin, that's the I'm hungry hormone, is having a party, basically screaming at your brain that you need to eat right now. So you're not just feeling hungry, you are fighting a legit biochemical storm inside your body. And all of this chemistry creates a really frustrating, vicious cycle. Because you eat late at night, you wake up with absolutely no appetite. There's even a clinical term for it, morning anorexia. This doesn't mean you have an eating disorder, it just describes the physical feeling of not being hungry. But because you skip breakfast, your body hits the panic button later that day, the intense cravings kick in, and the whole cycle starts all over again.
Okay, so before we start talking about solutions, we have to pause. It is super important to make sure we're actually talking about NES, because it can get confused with a couple of other conditions.
Making the right distinction is absolutely key, so let's break this chart down. The number one difference is awareness. With NES, you are wide awake and you know exactly what you're doing. Compare that to sleep-related eating disorder, or SRED. That's where you're totally asleep, basically sleepwalking to the fridge, and you have zero memory of it in the morning. Then you have binge eating disorder. You're awake for that, but the main feelings are a loss of control and eating very large amounts of food. With NES, the portions are usually smaller, and the driving thought isn't a loss of control, it's the belief that you need to eat to be able to fall asleep. Okay, so if the problem is that our clocks are out of sync, then the solution is we gotta sync them back up. So let's walk through a totally practical 4-step action plan to help reset your body's rhythm. The whole strategy, the entire goal, has a name: circadian realignment. It sounds complicated, but it's not. All it means is that we are retraining your body. We're teaching it the simple lesson it seems to have forgotten. Daytime is for fuel and activity, and nighttime is for fasting and rest. Simple as that. So here are 4 proven science-backed strategies to do it. First up, light therapy. Getting in front of a bright 10,000 lux light box every morning sends a powerful, hey, it's daytime signal to your brain, which helps lock in your body clock. Second, front load your calories. This one feels weird at first, but you have to eat a big protein-packed breakfast, even when you're not hungry. This helps teach your body to expect its fuel earlier in the day. Third, practice relaxing without food. Techniques like progressive muscle relaxation are amazing for lowering those stress hormones before bed. And finally, number 4, cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT is so powerful because it helps you catch and challenge those automatic thoughts. That little voice that says, I have to eat to sleep.
If you take away just one single thing from this explainer, I hope it's this. This is not about being weak. It is not a character flaw. It is a complex biological challenge that's all about your body's internal rhythms. And just understanding that can help you stop blaming yourself and start taking real steps that actually work.